Commissioner Chow, it's 1 o'clock. Would you like to begin the meeting?
I would be happy to unmute the meeting. I mean, unmute the call and start the meeting. Hello. All right. Is everybody here?
Christine Chapman here.
Now everybody's here.
Excellent. Yay. Okay. So good afternoon. I'm Suman Chow, Chair of the Instructional Quality Commission. Thank you for joining us today. Today's meeting is a teleconference with several locations, including the Department of Education building. Because we can't see one another, I will ask the commissioners at each of the locations to state your name and any other commissioner at your location, and verify the public meeting notice agenda is posted at your location, and indicate if any members of the public are present at your location and have them introduce themselves if they choose to do so. Also, throughout the meeting, please identify yourself when you are speaking. I'll start off. I'm in San Marino. I've posted the public notice agenda at my location, and there are no public members at my location. In Sacramento, at the California Department of Education, Vice Chair Wu.
Hello, I am joined here by Commissioners Naditz and Pontai and State Member, Board Member Rucker. The public meeting notice agenda is posted, and there are a few public members at our location. Are there any public? Okay, we do have a couple of public members at our location. Do you wish to introduce yourself?
Contract for the Ethnic Studies Project.
Excellent. Okay, moving on.
Okay, excellent. In Delano, Commissioner Chapman.
This is Christine Chapman in Delano. The public meeting notice is posted, and there are no members from the public at this time.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Chapman. In La Jolla, we have Commissioner Costa Hernandez.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Commissioner Costa Hernandez. The meeting agenda is posted, and there are no public members at my location.
Thank you so much. In Ontario, Commissioner Diaz. Hello, Commissioner Diaz in Ontario.
I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Oh.
I am here in Ontario with Commissioner Murphy Corwin.
Hello.
And our public meeting agenda notice has been posted, and there are no members of the public at our location.
Thank you so much. In Murrieta, we have Commissioner Iniguez.
Hi, this is Commissioner Iniguez. The meeting agenda is posted, and there are no members of the public at my location.
Thank you so much. In Anaheim, we have Commissioner Lara.
Hi, this is Commissioner Lara. The agenda for the meeting has been posted, and there's no members of the public present.
Thank you so much. In Sierra Madre, we have Commissioner Munoz.
Hi, this is Commissioner Munoz. The public meeting notice is posted, and there is one member of the public at my location.
Okay. And if nobody at your location would like to introduce themselves, we are going to move on.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi. My name is Miles Burke.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
So glad that you're here to join us. So continuing on, in Pico Rivera, we have Commissioner Renteria.
Hi, everyone. This is Commissioner Renteria. The public the meeting and agenda is posted, and there are 0 public members at my location.
Thank you so much. In Pasadena, we have Commissioner Rustin.
Hello, this is Commissioner Rustin. The public meeting notice is posted, and there are no public members at my location.
Thank you so much. In Whittier, we have Commissioner Tonkovich.
Hello, this is Commissioner Tonkovich. The public meeting notice and agenda is posted, and there are no members of the public present here.
Thank you so much. In Fairfield, we have Commissioner Williamson.
Hi, everybody. It's Commissioner Williamson. Public meeting notice and agenda are posted, and there are no members of the public at my location.
Thank you so much. Let me see. I believe that is all of us. Thank you so much, commissioners and State Board of Education members, members of Seaford staff, the public for joining us. I now call the Instructional Quality Commission meeting to order. In Sacramento at the California Department of Education, in addition to the commissioners and State Board member, are Stephanie Gregson, Executive Director of the Instructional Quality Commission, Constantino Silva, Administrator of the Curriculum Frameworks Unit, Cliff Rudnick, Administrator of the Instructional Resources Unit, Ken McDonald, Consultant, and Tracy Yee, IQC Liaison. Dr. Gregson, please introduce any other CDE staff I didn't mention.
Absolutely, Commissioner Chow. We have Susan Sweeney, who's liaison to the IQC as well, and Letty Krause, who's our lead for the arts framework. And Kyle Petty, he's trying to hide in the corner, who is working on our arts framework as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and welcome to all. There are no changes in the agenda at this time. I want to review some procedures regarding today's teleconference meeting, since it's our first of the year. This teleconference meeting is being webcast from the host location at the California Department of Education in Sacramento. Whenever you're not speaking, please mute your phone by pressing *6. This will eliminate background noise and make it easier for everyone to hear the discussion. When you wish to speak, unmute your phone by pressing *6 and identify yourself before speaking. At each teleconference location, members of the public will be given the opportunity to provide public comment. All votes during this teleconference meeting will be done by roll call. So we're going to move on to the next agenda item, unless there are questions. And I don't hear any. So our next item is to approve the minutes for March 28th, 2019 Commission meeting. You have the minutes of the March 28th, 2019 IQC meeting before you. If you have substantive changes, please state them now. If there are any minor changes not affecting the content, please submit them to the staff. May I at this time have a motion to approve the March 28th, 2019 meeting minutes?
This is Commissioner Costa Hernandez. I move to approve the March 28th meeting minutes.
Okay. Can I have a second, please?
This is Commissioner Munoz. I second it.
Thank you so much. Moved by Commissioner Costa Hernandez, seconded by Commissioner Munoz. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any public comment? Then I'd like to at this time call for a roll call vote. Tracy Yee will conduct the roll call vote.
IQC Chair Chow,
Yes.
IQC Vice Chair Wu,
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Costa Hernandez,
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Iniguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Lara,
Yes.
Commissioner Munoz,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy-Corwin,
Yes.
Commissioner Naditz,
Yes.
Commissioner Fanthai,
Yes.
Commissioner Renteria,
Yes.
Commissioner Rustin,
Yes.
Commissioner Tonkovich,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson, Commissioner Williamson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
All right, thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to give a brief report, and just on behalf of all of the educators who are at the school sites, I know that it's a busy time of year, and so I just want to express my appreciation for everyone who is participating in the meeting, the members of the public comment who are present, and all the Seaford staff and everybody who's joining us today. I feel like there's some pretty important discussion That's to be had in regards to the 2020 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum, and our discussion around the draft before it goes for public comment is important and relevant to supporting access and equity for all the students of the state of California. So thank you so much for that. And that concludes my report. And so at this time, I'd like to invite our Executive Director, Dr. Stephanie Gregson, to give her report.
Great, thank you, Chair Chow. So last week was a very exciting and eventful week. We had the state board meeting on May 8th. I will also say that's also the day my son turned 17. So big day all the way around. And during that state board meeting, Commissioner Wu and I were able to present the work of the Instructional Quality Commission and our Curriculum Framework and Evaluation Criteria Committee on the Health Education Framework. We had a lot of public comment, same public comment we heard during our Instructional Quality Commission. And so the state board members were able to have a quality discussion around the health framework, and I'll let our state board member talk about that during her time. But I also want to emphasize that there's much work to be done around our health education, and it's exciting that we have dedicated funds to provide professional learning for health education that's based on the health education framework, and the Orange County Department of Education is leading this work. They'll be developing professional learning modules for teachers and administrators with the foundation of the health education framework, and also communication toolkits so that we can ensure that accurate information is being communicated to our communities and our teachers and administrators. Commissioner Wu, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I'll add in. I really enjoyed attending the meeting. There was a lot of public comment. There were several hours of public comment, though I'd say there was a larger proportion of it that was very positive and supporting the work that we did on the framework, which was it felt really good to listen to that and to hear that. After the public comment, the board had a great discussion, and they asked some very insightful questions, including the superintendent. And I really enjoyed hearing their process and seeing how it very much echoed our process as well, as they decided to go ahead and go with our framework and pass it. So I was very excited.
It's a very exciting meeting. And so along the same lines of the frameworks, we're also working on our Arts and World Languages framework. The advisory committees for those two frameworks are continuing their meeting. They have about 3 more meetings together till they'll be recommending the draft frameworks to the Instructional Quality Commission and going out for more public comment on those frameworks. Also, some very exciting news in the May revise, we have funding for the updating and revising the mathematics framework. So very excited to see that. We'll be getting that work underway this year with focus groups in August across the state. So it was very happy news in the May revise for us. I'd also like to provide a little bit of an update with the system of support. The system of support is coordinating efforts across California with the state board, with the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, and the California Department of Education, along with all of our county offices. And we're coordinating our efforts to support our districts and county offices in those areas that they need more support to help impact positively student outcomes. So it's been very exciting to be a part of this work and working very closely with county offices as they work directly with other county offices and building capacity to supporting our districts and their movement to really impact change at the local level. And so we're just continuing on with that work. We haven't had a state board update on that, and we probably won't for a little while because we're entrenched in the work and we want to make sure we give it time. So it's a very exciting opportunity. And also at the last week at the May board meeting, Deputy Adams was celebrated, and he is retiring as the end of June. He'll be retiring. And that concludes my report. Thank you, Commissioner Chow.
Thank you so much for your report. All really good things that are happening, on behalf of kids, on behalf of teachers who support their kids. So thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to invite our State Board of Education Member Patricia Rucker to give a report on the activities of the State Board.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you very much, Commissioner Chow. On behalf of my colleague Eileen Strauss, who also shares the responsibility to serve as liaison from the State Board to the IQC, I want to welcome all the commissioners in each of the places where you are across the state this afternoon. And I also want to thank those who are here in Sacramento. I'm just going to add briefly to what Dr. Gregson said concerning the adoption of the health framework. The health framework was reviewed and considered for adoption during a public hearing. We were very pleased to get a flavor of some of the concerns that were expressed during the public comment. For those who had concerns about the content of the framework, as well as those who came to express their support of the framework, the board members learned a great deal in that conversation. One of the, probably what was common for both folks who were concerned about the framework, as well as those who expressed support for the framework, what we clearly heard was a clear desire to make sure that health instruction in California served the needs not only of the students, but supported the engagement and initiatives of parents, because probably among all of the curriculum that is taught in California public schools, the health framework probably touches and crosses over not only into attitudes and values about personal care and health care, but also the attitudes and values that parents choose to develop and implement and teach their own students. And so we clearly heard that not only from those who had concerns about the content of the framework, but also from those who were supporting the framework as well and the opportunities that it would present. What we learned from that conversation was that in looking at some of the recommendations for content and curriculum, the board clearly heard what the concerns were. There was a recommendation as part of the motion to remove some very specific text that had been recommended not for adoption, but for use as resources, in particular for parents. I want to remind the public and to remind schools and districts the framework is voluntary, not mandatory, and in taking the action to adopt the framework, the board unanimously recognized that this is an improvement and a conversation that will continue and creates a new story and a new look at what health education in California can be. So I was very proud to be able to be there. I was very proud to support board member Feliza Ortiz-Licon in the work that she did to support the IQC through this development process. And then going forward, as new curriculum material are also vetted and considered and recommended, we know that this is a conversation that will continue. The regular activities of the board included the business of overseeing our state's system of support and improvement. We also did work and had conversations about adopting and putting in place the LPAC, as well as work on overseeing charter schools. So the board does more than just take the recommendations that are brought to us by the IQC, but I must say for the 2 days that we had for the board meeting, the IQC recommendation concerning the framework was something I was heartily looking forward to. I also want to let you know that before the board meeting happened, the 2 days of the board meeting, we did have a study session. And the purpose of the study session was the first opportunity for all of the board members to come together to have a conversation about a number of topics. And I just lost what the study session was about. I'm sorry. I just lost my thought. But I'll come back to you and tell you what the study session was. I just lost that thought this very moment, so I apologize for that. But we are looking forward to continue with our partnership and relationship that the IQC has with the board in its advisory capacity. Thank you all for taking the time out of your professional pursuits and responsibilities to do the work that you were tasked to do here today. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much, Board Member Rucker, for your report. We appreciate it. And so at this time, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, the 2020-2021 IQC meeting dates. The Seaford staff has reviewed the IQC's upcoming projects in 2020 and 2021 and has suggested to revise the approved 2020 meeting calendar as follows. The suggestion is to cancel the March 19th, 2020 meeting. There's one agenda item for this meeting that can be moved to the May meeting. There's another suggestion to add an April 6th, 2020 meeting. An additional meeting is needed to review the public comments received from the draft arts and world languages frameworks. Second 60-day public review and comment period that ends in March before the State Board takes action to adopt the frameworks in May. In addition, the Seaford staff has suggested the following 2021 meeting dates: May 20th and 21st of 2021, May 19th and 20th of 2021, August 17th, 2021, September 22nd and 23rd of 2021, November 17th through the 18th of 2021. Seaford staff, do you have any comments?
No, we have no comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any comments about these proposed dates? Okay, so I'm giving it 5 Mississippis because I know that the star 6 can be tricky sometime, but I'm not hearing any comments. And so at this time, I'm going to ask if I may have a motion to approve the revised 2020 and new 2021 meeting dates.
This is Commissioner Naditz, so moved.
Thank you so much. May I have a second?
Wu seconds.
Thank you so much. Motion moved by Commissioner Naditz, seconded by Commissioner Wu. Is there any discussion on the motion at this time? Any public comment? And I'd like to call for a roll call vote, and Tracy Yee will be conducting that vote.
IQC Chair Chow,
Yes.
IQC Vice Chair Wu,
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Costa Hernandez,
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
okay, Commissioner Fairchild's absent, Commissioner Inigas,
Yes.
Commissioner Lara,
Yes.
Commissioner Munoz,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy-Corwin,
Yes.
Commissioner Naditz,
Yes.
Commissioner Fanthai,
Yes.
Commissioner Renteria, Commissioner Renteria,
Yes?
Commissioner Rustin,
Yes.
Commissioner Tonkovich,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
okay, Assemblymember Weber's absent. The motion passes.
Thank you so much, Tracy. We're going to now at this time move on to other matters and public comment. Are there any other matters of public comment on non-agenda items from individuals at any of the teleconference locations? Okay, hearing none, at this time I would like to, I guess, pass the mic, the gavel, onto the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Chow. Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, we're going to call the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee to order. The members of the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee are myself and Commissioner Chair Munoz, Commissioners Lara, Hendai, Renteria, Rustin, Williams, and IQ Chair Chow. The action of this committee will take today is to approve the draft ethnic study model curriculum that was developed by the Model Curriculum Advisory Committee for posting for public review. This is only our first step in a process that will eventually lead to us recommending the model curriculum to the State Board at the end of the year. I would like to thank the members of the writing team, R. Nelson, Concordia, Guillermo, Gomez, Janelle Hope. They did an incredible job. Their task was a very difficult one to draft the chapters to meet the requirements of the statute and the guidelines approved by the State Board, and then make revisions based on the consensus decisions of the Model Curriculum Advisory Committee. I look forward to our discussion of the draft model curriculum. But first, I've asked Dr. Gregson to provide some context for today's discussion and action. Dr. Gregson?
Thank you, Chair Diaz. So the development of a model curriculum is similar to the process you know so well for curriculum frameworks. A model curriculum, though, is a smaller document with a more specific purpose, so it's a very narrow topic. And there are slightly fewer steps, but each of those steps is critically important to the development of a quality final product. Each of these steps is noted in the schedule of significant events that you and the State Board approved last year. The CDE began this process in January 2018 by conducting a webinar to gain public input on the process. We had about over 60 members of the public participate in our public webinar. That input was used to draft a set of guidelines to direct the development of the model curriculum. And first, this commission and then the State Board of Education approved those guidelines, a copy of which you have is attachment 6 to this item. Once the guidelines were adopted by the State Board, we set out about recruiting an advisory committee to help create a first draft of the model curriculum. That draft, the sum product of the committee's work, is what you have before you today. The Model Curriculum Advisory Committee was selected through an open application process. The Commission recommended members last November who were appointed by the State Board in January. The Advisory Committee met 3 times, once in February, March, and April. They made extensive revisions to the draft prepared by the writers. They took public comment at each of their meetings and received extensive public comment at the Ethnic Studies email box. Today, you will be discussing and making revisions to the draft model curriculum that the Model Curriculum Advisory Committee recommended to you at its last meeting in April. After you've determined what changes and additions you would like to make to the draft, you will ask the full Instructional Quality Commission to take action to direct the writers and staff to make the changes before the draft model curriculum is posted for a period of public review and comment. You will also be asking the IQC to delegate IQC Chair Chow and Subject Matter Committee Chair Diaz to review and approve the changes to the draft model curriculum after the writers have made them. Bless you. As you do this work, remember that the purpose of the model curriculum is to support districts who wish to implement ethnic studies programs at the local level. This guidance actually comes at a very critical time. Right now, there's Assembly Bill 331, authored by Assemblymember Medina, that is looking at requiring ethnic studies as a graduation requirement as a one-semester course. So either standalone one-semester course or in an integrated course with maybe language or literacy or history, where ethnic studies is the primary content. This legislation was taken up by the Appropriations Committee today. I do not know the outcome of that committee's work because we're here. So this guidance, though, is at the basis of that legislation. It is guidance right now. It's not a mandate for instruction. So while it contains a variety of sample course outlines, it's not curriculum. This is not instructional materials. This is a guidance document for districts who are interested in implementing an ethnic studies course. So I just want to make sure that that's very clear. It does not replace pre-service courses or in-service trainings, and it does not replace ongoing professional learning. It is not a mandate that requires all schools to offer courses in ethnic studies. But however, I said, remind you of Assembly Bill 331. So what happens after this IQC meeting? There are many opportunities for public input and for you to discuss and revise the draft model curriculum. The public review and comment period will last through the summer. You will see the comments from that review at your September meeting. At that time, you will decide what changes you would like to make to the draft model curriculum based on the comments and suggestions from the field review. Then in November 2019, you'll take action to recommend the revised draft model curriculum to the State Board of Education for adoption. At every subject matter committee meeting and every IQC meeting, there will be opportunities for members of the public to provide comments on the draft model curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Gregson. Now, I'd like to spend some time going over the guidelines and how the draft model curriculum meets them. Ken McDonald is going to give us some highlights from the draft.
Thank you, SMC Chair Diaz. The statute that authorized the development of the model curriculum states that it shall be written as a guide to allow school districts to adapt their courses to reflect the student demographics in their communities. The model curriculum includes examples of courses offered by local educational agencies that have been approved as meeting the A through G admissions requirements of the University of California and California State University, including course outlines for those courses. As Dr. Gregson noted, the guidelines were developed from public input received in a webinar that was held in January 2018. The guidelines were provided as attachment 6 to your agenda item. I'm not going to go over all the specific guidelines, but I'd like to highlight a few key items. The guidelines state that the model curriculum should promote student empowerment, civic engagement, and cultural understanding. The advisory committee spent a lot of time talking about the values and essential principles that they wanted to include. The model curriculum should reflect current research and pedagogies. This was aided by the fact that we had a few leading scholars in ethnic studies on the advisory committee. The model curriculum should be inclusive and support all students to learn different perspectives. The model curriculum should be aligned to our other state curriculum documents with several standards and frameworks specifically referenced. The writers and advisory committee added a number of lesson suggestions that include citations to standards in history, social science, language arts, and English language development. Furthermore, the draft was written to be consistent with the instructional shifts in the history, social science framework. The model curriculum has to provide support for teachers and administrators who want to implement ethnic studies programs. To that end, the draft speaks to the need for professional development, provides support for both new and veteran teachers, and stresses the importance of administrator support in implementing an instructional program in ethnic studies. The Model Curriculum Advisory Committee and the writing team have created a draft that is designed to provide support for teachers, administrators, families, and communities, and offer a clear vision of ethnic studies education that improves the lives of all California students. There is a long way still to go, and we look forward to working with you to ensure that the final draft that you recommend to the State Board reflects public input and the guidelines that you and the board approved.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. Are there any questions about the guidelines? Okay, members of the SMC were able to attend each of the advisory committee meetings and observe the discussions on how to make this model curriculum a document that will be used by teachers, not just sit on the shelf. I would like to invite members of the History Social Science SMC who attended one of the meetings to report on what they observed. So at this time, if you attended any of those meetings, would you please share any personal observations that you made?
This is Commissioner Lara. How you doing, everybody? I just, may I speak?
Of course, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I attended one of the meetings. I just want to say that the committee did grapple with a lot of tough issues regarding on how best to move forward with the model that can be practical and be used. I'm really glad that they worked hard, tackle tough issues, and put together a framework that's worthy of consideration. I look forward to public comments and getting more insights from practitioners from across the state of California, parents, and hopefully maybe even students when they take a look at this framework. So I look forward to continuing the discussion in the future, and thank you to staff and thank you to the advisory committee for all your hard work.
Wonderful. Thank you for those comments. Would anyone else like to share any personal remarks from attending those meetings?
Hello, this is Commissioner Rustin. So I did attend a meeting as well, and I second everything that Commissioner Lara just spoke about. I do want to say the meeting that I attended, I did see the members of the committee really grapple with the research because so much of this is really cutting edge, and I saw debates involving some of the latest research that has been published. So I really thank the committee for its work. I think this is a trailblazing set of frameworks here, and I definitely look forward to the public comments this summer.
Wonderful. Thank you for those comments. Anyone else, any other commissioners attend the meetings that would like to express any personal remarks at this time?
Yes, this is Commissioner Pontai. I attended one of their first earlier meeting, and it was very empowering. They had a really difficult task in front of them, and it was at their early stage, but seeing the end product, I'm excited and I'm happy with the work that they've done and all of the time and energy that the staff has put into this. So I'm really delighted and commend them for the work that they have put in.
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner Pantai. Any other commissioners that would like to make comments?
Hi, this is Commissioner Munoz.
Yes, Commissioner Munoz.
Hi, I'd like to echo the other sentiments from the other commissioners, but I also would like to thank the chair and the co-chairs in this event and for their diligence in keeping the conversation moving. I also like the interactions between higher ed, elementary, secondary, and high school teachers. They brought a lot to the table, and particularly looking at their lesson studies and looking at also paying tribute and note to the founders of ethnic studies who paved the early way with the movement. I was very pleased with everything and the debating and the structure, and again, thank the CDE staff for their work in facilitating this as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, thank you for those comments. Are there any other commissioners that would like to make comment from attending the meetings? Okay, well, thank you for those who did make their comments, and also thank you for taking the time away from your professional duties and other matters and attending a meeting. Again, your participation is very much appreciated by the advisory committee. Now I'd like to turn the discussion to the chapter drafts. We will go in order by chapter number, starting with chapter 1, introduction. I will first ask the SMC members if they have any edits, if they would like to make to the chapter, and then followed by other IQC members, and then finally the State Board of Education liaison. First, are there any comments, questions, or suggestions on chapter 1 by members of the SMC?
This is Commissioner Pantai. Looking at the very first chapter, line 149, it states, help students uncover their ancestral origins. I'm just really picky about word choice. It's not necessarily uncovering, but it's a discovery or a rediscover of their ancestral origins. So I'd like to kind of modify that or add, let the writer know that we could change that word.
Okay, so uncover to discover?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions on chapter 1 by members of the SMC? I did learn later in the document. I was a bit confused initially reading through the document in terms of some of the words that are used, and specifically the use of X in many of the words. While I understand the rationale behind it, I noticed that it wasn't until page 74 of the draft where it actually explains the use of X in many of the words, like history, for example. So I just wondered if as teachers take this document in and do things with it, I'm wondering if some of that might look confusing.
Hi guys, this is Commissioner Williamson, and I just wanted to jump in on that last comment really quick. I found it confusing as well, and I can see teachers, if they are not familiar with that use, they really they would struggle. So is it possible to put that piece as far as referencing why they're using the X somewhere earlier in the document, perhaps?
I think what I'm hearing you say is perhaps moving the references to the rationale behind using the act at the front of the document to avoid any confusion for teachers, administrators, and others using this document.
Exactly.
Okay. I think along the same lines, I actually had a question. I looked up history just because I was unfamiliar with the prefix HIS, and I did a little word digging. So maybe in the rationale, sort of describing, for me, I was confused because I thought that HIS meant a male, it deferred to a male gender prefix. I was surprised when I looked it up, and it did not, according to the word, the Greek word historia, or what it meant. It did not have a gender implication as originally intended by the Greeks. So I'm wondering if within the rationale it could be clarified that HIS historically, or within the context of the Greek word, it does not imply gender within that rationale. And again, I agree, moving it up to the front of the document. Are there any other questions with respect to Chapter 1? Okay. Then hearing none in Chapter 1, moving on to Chapter 2, sample course models.
Commissioner Diaz, would you like us to review the edits or suggestions for Chapter 1 before we move to the next chapter?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that, Dr. Gregson. I appreciate that. Would you
Dr.
please
McDonald, do you want to do that?
So we have on line 149, change uncover to recover, or discover, excuse me. And then on to move, or again, those sections in the course outlines are there very deliberately. So rather than move, we would probably copy or put some explanation of the use of the X. I imagine it would probably have to come in the nature of a footnote. These terms do appear in the glossary, so perhaps a brief explanation in a footnote and then a reference to the glossary would be the best way.
Okay.
Commissioner Diaz, does that reflect the intent of your edit and revision?
I think so, and it also reflects the comments that were made by my colleague.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, now we're going to go into Chapter 2, which is Item 2A1, Attachment 2. Are there any comments or questions or suggestions on Chapter 2 by members of the SMC? Okay, I'm not hearing any. I have noticed throughout the document, and I'm referring to line 121, when there's reference to content and language objectives, I'm not sure if it's clear as to the integration of language objectives, specifically for our teachers to right up front understand the difference between a content and a language objective. So that's just something I picked up in the first chapter that we go into an actual lesson purpose and overview. That the content objectives are clearly stated, but language objectives are not differentiated as language objectives. So perhaps I would say that if the writer could delineate the difference and maybe not lump them together, because those are definitely two different purposes of an objective, of a lesson objective. Page 9 of 297, there's a document that's very difficult to read. It's a primary source document. I wondered if it was difficult to actually decipher much of it. Is that due to a format issue, or?
Dr. McDonald, do you want to speak to this primary source?
It's a JPEG illustration that the committee member provided to us. So I did blow it up as much as I could and still fit it on the page. Otherwise, it's exactly as the committee member provided it to us. I suppose the possible solution would be to transcribe it, which we could probably do. But then obviously it would be a secondary source then. I mean, it would still have the text if that's the main objective, but it would no longer be a primary source.
Okay. Do any of my other, it's really difficult, I don't know if other members of the committee have any comments to make as we go through this particular chapter. Are there any questions or comments that people would like to?
This is Commissioner Pontai. We're talking about Chapter 2, right?
Yes.
In Chapter 2, I would like to make a recommendation on, I believe it is page 177, line 3673. That's 3673. They mention the Hmong and the secret war in Laos. I would like to include in that phrase at the end of line 3673, Hmong, Yumian, Laotian, and other Southeast Asians to fight the communists. So I would like to be more inclusive that we need to include the Mien, Laotian, and other Southeast Asians who were in that area during that time.
Can you spell the first word?
Mien, it's the Yumian, I-U, space, M-I-E-N, and then Laotian. I would also, to add to that, the following line, line 3674, to fight the communists, comma, Pathet Laos. Specifically, they were the faction, the group that was fighting. P-A-T-H-E-T, Laos. I just happen to know because I am Laotian American.
Okay, great. I also would like to maybe ask for clarification. Maybe Dr. McDonald, you can give us some insight. On page 100, line 2251, they reference Americanization programs. I'm unfamiliar with the term, and there was no reference to that term. Is that a term that's found in research or in?
I'm afraid I don't have the background to tell you what the committee was coming from in terms of that particular language.
Okay. I thought that was interesting choice of word, and I thought, well, maybe there's some research that supports that. What is that imposition through Americanization program? So.
I mean, I assume it refers to attempts to assimilate immigrant populations through use of policy.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions?
I did have a thought. This is Suman Chow, Commissioner Chow. Hi. And it's not necessarily specific to a line, but I'm, as I was reading through the draft, I was reading it through the lens of a teacher who is new, or maybe like in a pre-service program, through the lens of an administrator who is trying to support teachers, and referencing this as a guide, but maybe doesn't necessarily have the history, social science, or the ethnic studies background. And I feel like perhaps just in terms of formatting of some specifics, it would be good. I know that Commissioner Diaz, you referenced like some of the vocabulary that might not be immediately, easily understood, right, to the non-academic. And then also some of the tie-ins to other content areas per the guidelines that were provided for this framework. And I do remember that in other frameworks, such as the History Social Science framework and the ELA, ELD framework, there were like boxes, right? Or there were kind of formatting methods to help these kinds of things jump out at us. And I'm wondering, does that happen like later on in the drafting process? Is it like a first go around and perhaps that's why? Is that something that you suggest, you know?
This is Executive Director Gregson, and yes, those formatting and design pieces will come after the state board adoption. That's when we'll make the template stand out. If there's any call out pieces or sidebars that the commission would like to create, then that would happen in the editing and formatting stage.
Okay, awesome.
I did look at the guidelines. Thank you, Commissioner Wu. I did look at the guidelines under the general principles too. And I tried to reflect back on the work of previous frameworks within the inquiry cycle and having that rigorous approach to having students think critically about history and generate those authentic discussions. And as I reflected on some of the lessons, it did jump out at me that the rigor in some of the lessons are very different than others. For example, on page 14, the lesson, the dialogue or the inquiry where the discussion of students, as stated in the guidelines, when I look at the lesson itself, it begins on line 272. It has students using a very basic frame that's closed to dialogue, and so it's not really kind of a dialogue. It's more of a monologue. Specifically today in class, I thought or learned about the following three things: first, blank; second, blank; and lastly, I learned blank. Versus on page, there's another lesson that contrasts quite a bit. On page 109 of that chapter, the rigor is quite different, and I think it emphasizes more of that inquiry-based dialogue. So on page 109, what the students, the task is that students, beginning on the bullet number 4, line 2469, so they're going to review text, and then they're going to support an argument, find an argument, support an argument in favor, and oppose. They're going to do text annotation. They're going to support those arguments. They're going to find evidence in text that supports the reasoning of those arguments, develop them, and eventually end in a debate. And so and that's just an example, but throughout the lessons, like the model curriculum, I find that there is inconsistency with aligning to specifically the guidelines under number 2 general principles, and that the lessons are very inconsistent with respect to the rigor and what we're asking students to do in a critical inquiry.
So Commissioner Diaz, is this something that you want us to look for in public comments and bring back for discussion in September? Or would you like us to look at revising the lesson that you talked about on page 14 to mirror the rigor in the lesson that you discussed on page 109?
Well, I think that going back to, it just flagged for me what else might be, in terms of an alignment in that sort of guiding principle. That sort of jumped out at me throughout. I'm not necessarily recommending that the writers make changes now. I think it would be very appropriate to have the public interface with that and get comments from teachers, practitioners. But it's something that jumped out. I wanted to make my colleagues aware that I did find the rigor somewhat inconsistent.
So, hello, this is Commissioner Renteria. Can I add to that really quickly?
Yes.
So, I also agree with you. The only thing that I'm also thinking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I was reading through that same activity, because on page 15, I actually marked on my copy that I appreciated the fact that while you're right, the rigor was definitely not there. There was, I thought of it as a sense of this is an introduction into the class as a whole, and I see that they're very deliberate about making very specific connections to what's relevant. Like here, I know in page 15, they even quote House of Rep member Alexandra Ocasio. So as I was reading through that, because I know what you're talking about, the conclusive dialogue, I think for me, I was thinking of it as, oh, so these are activities you can do towards the beginning, and then as you continue going through the lesson, I did see the rigor increase. So I don't know if that was deliberate or if it was just the placement of the lesson.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I see what you're referring to. Just following up with that excerpt, the quote from Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, the students then copy definitions of privilege and meritocracy, and so it seems to me it's just throughout the lesson, but I could be missing. Yeah. I could be missing something else, but it's just very low rigor, and these are model curricula. We would like to make sure that our students are developing those critical thinking skills. But like I said, I don't think at this time there's an opportunity or a need to rewrite. I think it's important that our members of our public also weigh in on share their perspectives as well.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Are there any other comments or questions on Chapter 2?
Commissioner Diaz, this is Commissioner Tonkovich. Could I jump in even though I'm not on the SMC?
Yes.
Okay, I just had one suggestion on Chapter 2 in the first paragraph on, let me find it, the standards. It says content standards in history, social science, language arts, and English language development. Shouldn't there be an English in front of language arts? I know that's a small thing.
So English language arts?
Uh-huh.
That would be consistent with our frameworks. Dr. Gregson, we'd like to go ahead and note that as one of the edits.
Okay, to include English before language arts on line 12 on page 1 of Chapter 2. Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
Hi, this is Commissioner Munoz. I just, maybe it's my computer, but will some of these hyperlinks be vetted out? Because I had trouble getting on to some of the links. They were telling me I have the wrong server or not available. So that's my concern, is that some of these links on here, have they all been checked or will they be checked?
Yes, they will be checked. We will come back in September with any issues regarding links for the Instructional Quality Commission to discuss what they would like to do with links that are not valid.
Okay. And then just one other comment. I just wanted everyone to be aware that some of the lessons that were provided in this document, the teachers on the staff, they're very varied in how they formatted their own lesson plans on here. So I kind of also want us to be aware of and sensitive to some of the work that they put into these lesson plans. But I definitely agree regarding the rigor on some of them, because a lot of them who were submitted really put their heart and soul into testing some of these lessons in their classroom. But I recognize that there's a need to provide some more rigor in there. And that was a concern in the discussion with some of the teachers, is that we were going to tear apart all the lessons, when the discussion at that time was really to have people start thinking about model lessons. And they were under the gun as well.
Thank you. I think we definitely appreciate everyone's hard work, and so that goes without saying. We recognize that, and so at the same time, we're looking just to align all of this with the guidelines so that it's a consistent. So we could definitely consider each of those items, and as the public weighs in on that, I think that's also going to help inform and refine and make this ultimately a really great product.
I agree.
Okay. Are there any other comments or suggestions on Chapter 2? I would like to draw attention to page 260. It's lines 5,621 to 5,623. I know we're all familiar with the rhetoric that is happening nationally, particularly with Senator John McCain and his family. Some of the rhetoric has been very insensitive, and I think that this particular line, I'm kind of model. I'd like to have California model rhetoric that is not aligned with some of our leaders' rhetoric, and it is very inflammatory. And I think it is necessary to have his name mentioned in this thing. I understand it's within the context of the song lyrics. So I would like to have our committee kind of weigh in on that particular line.
So I'm going to have Cliff Rednick explain where the origin of this.
Right. It's just for the committee to note, this is a primary source document. It's not our document. The committee can absolutely say to remove this primary source, but we can't edit a primary source.
We're going to shut the loop.
We can't edit, we can't take out that verse.
Correct. We cannot take out that verse. This is not something that was written by us. It's a copyright issue.
Okay. Well, perhaps then our committee can discuss it, and if not, then the public can also wait. It may just be my own reaction to be contrary to what some of our national leaders are exemplifying. That's my personal reaction to it. Does anyone have any comments to make to that effect?
Sure, this is Commissioner Rustin. In thinking about this document as guidance versus day-by-day scripted and set of curriculum and instructional materials for a teacher, I appreciate the inclusion in the document because a teacher or a school or a district could, of course, make the decision to not use that primary source. I know that myself, I would like to have too many resources than limited resources. And as a teacher, I appreciate the option being laid out for me, and then, you know, my call based on my students or based on my school and my community context. So I'm okay with leaving it in there as the committee put in.
Are there any other comments on Chapter 2?
Commissioner Diaz, this is Commissioner Tonkovich. I'd like to say that I am sitting on the fence about removing this primary source, and I'll tell you why. The guidelines were extremely positive and this, I could be misreading this, but I think we should focus on the positive in the curriculum model and not perhaps the negative. So I am inclined to agree with you that we should keep an open mind.
If I can have your attention for a minute.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Could you repeat what you said?
Quick moment to thank our Eagle Time specialist. In coding, we had coded the future
Can we have someone mute their phone, please? We can hear your school announcements. Thank
Sorry,
you.
Could you repeat your comment? I think you were unable to hear the last part of it.
Oh, well, my comment was I'm inclined to agree with you in considering whether to keep in the song or not, because when I read the guidelines, I thought it was extremely positive. And I could be misreading this, but it seems like we should focus more on the positive than the negative in the ethnic studies model. And so I'm saying I'm inclined to agree with you, not to include something that is a negative.
So are you suggesting to remove it because it is negative?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm saying that I'm open to the discussion of removing it because I'm not sure how negative it is. I would like someone to explain the song to me, actually.
Okay.
Or if not, we could wait for public comment and address this later.
Okay. Okay. Do other members of the committee would like to comment on Commissioner Tonkovich's suggestion to leave and have public comment onto it?
This is Commissioner Pontai.
Laura, I would like to wait for public comment. During public comment, hopefully there's some experts that will be able to comment to bring some clarity to it. And if other educators feel the same, we can get those concerns as well and hammer out some of the confusion at a future date. I think right now it's important that we allow the public as much opportunity to comment before we also make suggestions and changes to the current document. Thank you.
And there was another commissioner, was it?
This is Commissioner Pontai. I would like to add to that. This is a kind of a unit on hip hop, and hip hop is cultural expression. And keep in mind that I think that the poet, the writer here, there are multiple interpretations as well. For me as a teacher, I would leave it to my students to decide. I wouldn't quite do a knee-jerk reaction and say, let's take this out. I think that we could learn and have this as a teachable moment in the classroom where the teacher and the student can look at this lesson and learn from it and look at that piece, because not everything that is about ethnic studies and American identity and culture, it's both positive and negative, and I want to allow the class and the teacher and the students to decide that.
Hi guys, this is Commissioner Williamson, and I would like to support Commissioner Pontai's comment there, because that is so crucial in ethnic studies, with the idea that people have felt like they have been oppressed for so long. Sometimes that's their reaction, to allow that frustration out so that a positive outcome can happen.
Hey, thank you. Any other comments or suggestions or reactions?
Hi, this is Commissioner Munoz. I'm in agreement to keep this passage in. Again, hip hop is an expression. And I also think it's also critical because it starts to talk about, if you read down into the lessons, it's actually having a conversation, having kids take something up, take it apart and dissect it, and then figure out what is wrong with this. So I would like to keep it in and wait for public comment.
Okay, any other comments or suggestions in Chapter 2 or on this particular topic? Okay, are we ready to move to Chapter 3? Okay, before we do that, Dr. McDonald, can you summarize for us any of the changes that were made? I think that the English and English language arts.
Right. Line 2 or line 12, add the English to English language arts. I'm a little confused about the separating out the content and language objectives piece. I can tell you that those were originally separate. There were a separate section for content objectives and a separate for language objectives. Ultimately, the committee combined them because they had the same exact problem of separating out the objectives. And in fact, many of the lessons did not have and do not have recommended language objectives. So that's something we could possibly do with guidance, but it would take more time than it would be required for this posting because we have 20-something lessons. So that would require going in, and remember, these are not our lessons. We did not write most of them. We would have to go in and figure out, because many of them would have to have objectives, new objectives added if we wanted to have the separate sections, because I would say probably about half of them did not have language objectives. Or if they were ancillary to learning the content.
Yeah, and okay, and I know that there's a key difference in the perspective, the language objectives, and is really specifically, I think, for that integrated ELD, is to identify within the lesson what tasks that are language-based students will participate in. And so that's that clear alignment with the ELD standards. That's why I had the same question as I was kind of going through it. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is originally in the template there was a content and a language objective, but that the members didn't have understanding is what I'm hearing you say about the language objective, so it was combined with
We asked them to provide the language objectives, to give us language to put there, and they did not.
Okay.
So they said, well, let's combine the two, and some of them do have language objectives that are separate and that are under that header. You'll notice that in this lesson, on the one you cited on page 5, there really aren't any language objectives there.
Right.
So maybe we could if people want to come back with language to put in September, we could definitely do that. We have no problem separating them out. We just don't at the moment have anything to put in that separate box for most of these lessons.
Is the language objective part of the guidelines in the model curriculum?
The lessons, these pieces are not, the guidelines did not specify that we had to provide sample lessons. That's something we do in a lot of our curriculum documents. We call them either vignettes or snapshots. The guidelines do not drill down to the level of saying that how we have to format our lessons. We could certainly put those in, and I agree with you, because we do provide alignment to English language arts standards and ELD standards in most of the lessons. This particular lesson does not have ELD standards alignment because the author did not provide them, but we could certainly put those in if you want to bring them in September.
Okay. Yeah, I think that for me it's confusing I would not want a teacher to pick this up and see language and content objective and then see that as an example of a language objective. It undoes what we've really been trying hard to do with our teachers with respect to specifically identifying language tasks in supporting a content objective. So yeah, I guess I'm open to working with you on perhaps adding some of those in, so that could be a clear identification with that, so that teachers don't become confused and muddy the two terms.
And you get to chapter 3, you'll see these lessons are all based on the lesson template in chapter 3. So we could split those out into 2 separate sets of objectives. We're happy to do that if the commission so directs. It's just we would need language to put in that second box because we do not have that at the moment.
So commissioners, a suggestion is, giving us time to work through this and bringing you back some revisions to review to look at content objectives and language objectives on these lesson plans. Is that something that you'd consider us being able to do?
I think so. Does anyone have a comment to make with respect to Dr. Gregson's suggestion?
This is Commissioner Costa Hernandez. Is that okay for me to suggest something?
Absolutely.
I would like us to stay at the standards level and not go into the language objective for the same reasons that we're discussing. I think the idea and that will make it consistent with the frameworks, especially the ELA, ELB framework, where the lessons address or list the number of standards from the ELD standards are addressed in the lesson, but don't necessarily go into a language objective. If we include the ELD standards addressed in the lesson in the list of standards or in the standards alignment piece of the lesson, I think we're better off than trying to identify a language objective for every lesson. That's my take on it.
So on the, thank you for that insight. So if we go with the removing reference to language objectives to make them all consistent, then we would be removing language objectives for the few that do have them. Is that what I'm
Yes.
hearing the recommendation to
Yes.
be?
Yes, and then make sure that if that we're clear when ELD standards are addressed within the lesson, whether it's part 1, part 2, the standards, that those are listed in that introduction to the lesson that has standards alignment.
Okay. So Dr. McDonald, based on that conversation, then in order to address the consistency throughout, is this a suggestion is to then remove language objectives for all of the lessons and specifically identify which ELD standard is addressed within each lesson. And so having said that, are there any members of the subject matter committee that would like to have a discussion about that proposal?
This is Commissioner Pontai. I think that we could go one of two ways. You either remove it for consistency or add to it. And I think that for cohesiveness and consistency, I think we should keep it and add to what is missing rather than remove it. Because as a teacher, we need as much as possible in terms of resources, and that includes ELD.
Okay, so there's the two train of thoughts are either to remove them all or to keep and add. Are there any other commissioners that would like to weigh in on either of those two perspectives?
This is Executive Director Gregson. Is this something that you want to wait for after public comment to determine which way to go, to see if you receive any public comment on this specific issue?
We could wait till public comment. If we received public comment, saying, I guess asking for language objectives for each of the lessons, would that give us enough time to write them before the November State Board meeting?
So it wouldn't be November State Board, it would be the November IQC meeting. And so the IQC would have another opportunity to make any revisions before it goes to the State Board.
Okay. All right. I think that approach is probably the best one to take, and then we certainly have these two options in our mind as we go through public comment and look at it, and then make a determination moving forward. How do committee members feel about that? Hey, I'm guessing by not saying anything that you're good with that. Okay. So that concludes our Chapter 2. Dr. McDonald, are there any other clarifications besides the two you mentioned from our discussion that you'd like to clarify or put forth to the group?
On page 9, the primary source, would you like us to try and expand it but keep it more or less as a graphic, or would you like us to transcribe it?
I think just keep it, maybe enlarge it as much as you can, but I think with what folks are saying, we're just going to wait for public comment and see if that also comes up in that process.
Part of the challenge also was our 508 procedures, so what we may have to do is maybe we could try splitting it into two and have one on each page. That would allow us to make it a little bit larger, I think.
I think, however, it could be clear for the public to interact with that document with the idea, because I know I found it difficult to read and the public may not find it. I think breaking it up into 2 pages might be a good idea.
Commissioner Diaz, is that coming from your end?
No.
Can we please have someone mute their phone? We can hear your school announcements. Thank you. Commissioner Diaz, can you repeat yourself? We didn't hear you.
Yeah, I think making the document, I would hate to have the staff retype all of that, but maybe making the document as clear as possible so that the public can interact with that document and get as close to the following the 508 procedures as possible, because for me it was very difficult to read. I did a lot of guessing as I tried to read that.
Director Gregson also has a whole division of graphic artists at her command, so perhaps they have magic software that can clarify the text on that page.
That would be
So
great.
we'll see what we can do.
Yes, we will work through this.
Okay, any other suggestions that were captured from our discussion that before we move to chapter 3?
The only other specific edits that I heard was on page 177, where we're going to add to the definition of the secret war in Laos. The second part on 3673, utilizing Hmong, Yu Mien, Laotians, and other Southeast Asians to fight the communist, Pathet Laos. Period. That's
Yeah.
for that.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, are we ready to move to chapter 3? Then that begins. It's item 2A1, attachment 3, and it's chapter 3, UC approved course outlines overview. Would anyone like to have any comment to make on this particular chapter? I just had one comment, and it kind of goes back to, and I didn't write down which commissioner made the comment about the links, but as a district, working at a district as an administrator at a district, I definitely on line 280 to 282, it specifies that the LEA should make sure. It's on page 12 of chapter 3. It says the LEA should make sure those materials are properly vetted. Obviously, that addresses the selection process of materials, which we understand that process to be. But just making sure that the links and everything works. There's so much. There's YouTubes. There's just a lot in there that it really becomes unreasonable to have the LEA kind of make sure all those links work. So if those can all be ensured that they work, I guess I just want to echo that. Not leave it up to the LEAs to figure out.
This is Ken McDonald here. In terms of the document, we personally checked every single link in the document when it went from the committee to us to post for you guys. I can tell you that when we did that, there were probably about 20 links that were broken, and which in some cases we had to go back to the committee member and say, your link is broken, can you give us an alternative? In some cases, we were able to find an alternative. In some cases, we had to use our own judgment to fix it. In some cases, we could not fix it and had to remove the link. When you get to the appendices, you'll note that there's a language there that is a disclaimer saying that we were not able to check the hundreds of links that were in the course outlines. And to be honest, we're probably not going to be able to fix those because those are UC's intellectual property. So at the best, what we'll probably have to do is, if they're broken, we'll have to put language saying this link is non-functional. And when we talked with the committee, we tried to discourage them from including hyperlinks, as we found out doing many frameworks that had lots of links. Link rot is a significant problem. And these are documents which we do try and update. We have an annual update process, which each year I get a little ping in my inbox saying, these 150 links in your document are all broken. Can you fix them, please? But the committee elected to include links, so we fix them when we see them. I can tell you, for our 508 posting requirements, when we submit this, our Technology Services Division tells us when links are broken, says these must all be fixed, and so we fix them. I am not surprised if some broke between that day 2 weeks ago and today, and there will be ones that break in the future, but there's not much we can do about that short of fixing them whenever we see them. But all the links did work when we submitted this document for web posting. So if you find any that did not, just send it to the director and she can fix them, or give them to me to fix. But they will break over the course of this public comment, and I'm sure we'll get comments saying this doesn't work.
Okay. will be part of the process that we go through. Are there any comments or questions besides, I know they spent some time on page 12 sort of echoing that whole length and separation and so forth. Any other comments from others on any other part of chapter 3? I'm not hearing none. Okay. Then we'll move to the glossary. That is attachment 4. Are there any questions or comments on the glossary?
This is Commissioner Wu. I'm not a member of the committee, but as a non-history social science person, could we add in a pronunciation guide for all of those words that have X's in weird places, please?
A pronunciation guide?
Yes, just for the words that have random X's, like after the word, would be really helpful, because even reading it, I couldn't pronounce it in my head, and that's frustrating.
Actually, in all those cases, the X is just spoken as the letter X. So it would be Latin X.
Yeah.
Okay, still, a pronunciation guide would be helpful.
If I may jump in, this is Commissioner Naditz. Actually, I was wondering about a pronunciation guide for, and I don't know how to pronounce this, the HX-tory. That's what I was, so I was actually looking for some help there, where the X is in the middle, replacing his or her in several words, just because I wasn't sure what the proper way was to say that, and the person I wanted to be correct, but then I didn't know what to do.
From what they told us, that they actually pronounce it herstory.
So can we clarify that somewhere in the?
Absolutely, we can add that to the glossary. That's
Thank you.
They say they pronounce it herstory.
Just I would say throughout the document, there's definitely inconsistencies with using the format that they suggest, and then going back to Chicana, Chicano, and not including the X. It's throughout the document. I also noticed some places where it either did have the X as an option, or it did not have the X with the same word. And I was confused as to if it was it was within a context versus maybe just making sure that they're all consistent, even within the glossary.
They deliberately made it inconsistent in some places, because when referring to the historical movement, they had to use, for example, when referring to Chicano studies, those are, that's how the discipline was created. So in some cases, like, for example, we're referring to past programs or past departments. I'm not aware of any college department today that uses Chicanx. It's kind of a forward-looking term that some people in the discipline use to try and create a gender-neutral version. Others find that inappropriate. So there's a lot of debate in this. I can tell you that the committee did look at how it was used in each case. We did our best faith effort to try and respond to those concerns. You'll notice, for example, even the herstory with an X isn't used in some of the other chapters, because those are the lessons and outlines for teachers, whereas chapter 1 was kind of more of the overarching theory. So we tried to keep it there and not confuse people by putting it in lessons where teachers or students who are not familiar with that term are going to see it. But certainly, if you can point out anything that looks inconsistent, we would be happy to take a look at it and see if we can fix it. But I can tell you that the committee was very attentive to the use of this terminology. And there were a few cases where it's not consistent, but that, for the most part, was on purpose from their perspective, what they wanted to accomplish.
And just a follow-up question, you mentioned something earlier in your statement about it not being a scholarly term or a research-based term. I was just wondering, you mentioned something about being forward-thinking. Where did the committee conclude this from their conversations, or is it something that is the usage of herstory, for example, or other of the X's, is that something that came out of the committee's conversation, or is that something that's grounded in some scholarly articles or research?
Well, I'm definitely not a scholar of ethnic studies. However, I familiarized myself with the research, and my colleague Janelle Hope also is very familiar with this work. I don't want to speak for her because she's not in the room, but I can tell you that the use of the terminology did come from the committee. Generally, I have not seen the term herstory with an X in any scholarship that I've read, and or any of the journal articles or contemporary literature. There is some dispute, as I noted, about the use of the X in the end of terminology like Latinx or Chicanx, and that use varies from source to source. So I think the committee discussed these things, and the use of the terminology in each case came from the committee.
And so I would like to add to that, this is Executive Director Gregson, I would like to add to this that there is state board guidelines regarding that this model curriculum is written in a language that is inclusive and supportive of multiple users. So I think this conversation will be very important to have in September after it goes through the public comment review period, because as a commission, you'll need to look at that, these terms being used and determine, is that user friendly? And hearing from the public to determine that as well, because those terms are not usual terms for our teachers, especially those who are not within ethnic studies. And I think we need to be grounded in that this model curriculum is going to have an impact on our classrooms, especially if AB 331 passes. This model curriculum is going to be utilized quite a bit to help districts with meeting AB 331. So we'll want to make sure that our administrators and our teachers can understand the content of this model curriculum. So just to keep that in mind, and I think this is going to be a very important discussion for you to have in September.
This is Commissioner Lara. I totally agree with Dr. Gregson on this. And there are a few scholarly research that we can actually point to that include her story. And I do know various ethnic studies scholars that do use her story in their research. I know that the UCI, the University of California Irvine Cross-Cultural Center, uses her story with some of the work that they do in inclusiveness and diversity on their campus. I know some other university campuses do so well. And I know I use in my classrooms some research studies by Rethinking Schools, a popular educational magazine that talks about using her story as well. But I agree with public comments. I think public comments will bring these types of things to light and will allow us to have a more fuller discussion in September.
Great. Those are all really good conversations to consider our work in September. Okay. Are there any other comments on the glossary section or reactions or input?
This is Commissioner Pontai. I always try to look for consistency and cohesiveness, and the use of the X, I think that there's room for both, but it's really, it needs clarity. So there are parts of the text where it's used and parts where it's not, and that could confuse the teacher, especially a teacher who may not know about ethnic studies and may be using it for the first time. So I'd like it to be user-friendly as much as possible and really strive for clarity.
Thank you, Commissioner Pentai. Yeah, that's an excellent point, is to, if this truly is a guide, particularly for administrators and teachers, if the legislation passes, one could very clearly inference that without clear consistency as to the purpose of the word, how it was created, what it is, and how it's used, in what context, it's going to be a very confusing, navigation for many of our community members and our stakeholders to try to decipher if that's a typographical error or if it's just something that means. So I definitely concur. This is a great conversation to have after public comment. Anything else with respect to this particular section? Okay. All right. Okay, not hearing any. We're going to move on. Then we have the appendices. and they begin on attachment 5. Any comments or questions or thoughts? Okay, I'm hearing none. We could move on. Okay. All right, so it looks like we have come to agreement on a number of changes to the draft model. Before we take formal action, I just want to kind of echo the sentiment that seems to be an undercurrent throughout our first view of this, and that is that we want to have the public have an opportunity to weigh in on aspects of the draft model curriculum prior to our work in September and then again in November. And we certainly want to acknowledge the hard work of the committee and the CFER staff and the writers to put this together for us. So before we take formal action, we'll hear public comment. Are there any members of the public at this time at the teleconference site that would like to provide comment on the draft model curriculum or any of the issues that we have discussed? And you will have 2 minutes for your comments.
We have one member here at the CTE who would like to make public comment.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, SMC Chair Diaz and Executive Director Gregson and all the commissioners, new and old. My name is Ihsan Katir, and I'm the California Advocacy Director for the Hindu American Foundation. We're a 16-year-old advocacy group based in Washington, D.C., speaking up for the 3.2 million Hindus in America and the 780,000 Hindus in California. And we've worked for years on the adoption and the framework for the history and social studies, textbooks. And we look forward to working with you in the months and years ahead on this ethnic studies. I just wanted to introduce myself and welcome to all the new commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make comment?
We have one more here.
Good afternoon. My name is Tamara Carr. I go by Tammy. I'm from the California Teachers Association. We'd like to let you know some of the great positive feedback we have for you. One of the things is the collaboration of scholars from both college and pre-K to 12 was perfectly aligned. The entire span worked on that model curriculum. We felt there were a lot of rigor throughout the model curriculum. There was also best practices addressed, and especially addressed for the A to G requirements. For the LEAs, we felt that this was helpful so that they can align their AG courses, obviously, for ethnic studies, and they were able to connect it quickly. Also, we liked the way that it spoke to demographics of students. There seemed to be a very true discipline of things that people valued from ethnic studies that had been done in the past and bringing that and continuing those. It honored voices of classroom teachers, certain amount of academic freedom to implement, that was very apparent. At the university level, loving the whole idea of the state working on making sure folks can have undergraduate work in ethnic studies, as well as in teacher preparation, and hopefully having a lot more PD around that in districts. And I don't know my time, usually I see a clock, but okay, so here's my last comment. We love the templates to assist in the guidelines. And the only thing we did have a concern about was when it would go to the state board. The
Time.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public?
Hi, this is Commissioner Munoz. We have one. Hi, we have one.
Okay, please have them make their 2-minute public comment and introduce who they are.
Okay, go ahead. Hi, I am Miles Burke. I'm a 3rd grader. Today I want to thank you for all the hard work you do in helping and making sure that students in California get good instructional materials. I am happy that you will be discussing the ethnic studies model curriculum. I like learning about people and different cultures. I also like learning about my culture, which is Mexican, Native American, French, and German culture. It is important for me to know about other people's cultures and how we all make a difference in the world. I know this ethnic study model curriculum is for high school, but I know that it will trickle down into elementary and middle school eventually. I look forward to taking an ethnic study class when I go to Pasadena High School. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other members of the public that wish to make comments? Okay, all right. Hearing none, we'd like to thank everyone who took time to attend our meeting and make comment. Commissioners, you were all sent a link to all public comment received to date on the model curriculum, including the public comment that was shared with the advisory committee. Please note that suggestions from the public will only result in edits to the draft if Commissioner indicates that an edit should be made, and it is included in the motion to approve the draft for public posting. Before we move on to the formal action to recommend the draft model curriculum for posting, do any members of the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee want to discuss any of the public comments we just heard, or open up a discussion based on that public comment? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to the approval of the draft model curriculum with the changes discussed. So we're going to take action on the draft model curriculum, and we've made some of those edits. So as Dr. Gregson, can I create a motion to, I guess, first approve the model curriculum, right? And then we're going to ask the full commission to participate based on the edits?
Yes, you're going to make 2 motions. The first motion will be to recommend the draft model curriculum to the full IQC with the edits that you have made. And then the second will be to ask the full IQC to delegate the IQC chair and the subject matter committee chair to work with my staff and the writers as they make the changes that were approved by the commission. Would you like us to summarize those changes?
Yes, please, if you can.
Dr. McDonald?
All right. In Chapter 1, add a footnote that explains the use of the term herstory when it first appears and refer people to the glossary. On line 149, still in Chapter 1, change the use of the term uncover to discover. I think that's all I have for Chapter 1. Chapter 2, we will take the line 12, add English to English Language Arts. Page 9, we will take the redlining document and clarify it so that it is more readable. On page 177, we will add in the reference to the Secret War, utilizing Hmong, Yu Mien, Laotians, and other Southeast Asians to fight the communists, Pathet Laos. And then Chapter 3, there were no suggested edits. In Chapter 4, the request was to add a pronunciation guide to all of the words that use the X. We probably would add that as a note since we don't have a pronunciation guide for the other terminology, and then also add a pronunciation for how herstory with an X is pronounced. And I did not have any for the appendix.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that, Dr. McDonald. Okay, so at this time, I have a motion. May I have a motion to recommend the draft to the full IQC from a SMC member to recommend to the Instructional Quality Commission that the draft ethnic studies model curriculum be posted for its public review and comment with the changes that we have agreed to today.
Hi, Commissioner Williamson, so moved.
Commissioner Lara, second.
Great. Is there any discussion of the motion? Are there any commissioners not on the committee who would like to comment at this time? Okay, hearing none. Are there any comments from State Board Member Rucker?
I'll just make one comment. First of all, I want to thank you. I appreciated the conversation that the committee members had, particularly about the terms of art. I had the privilege of sitting as the liaison for the History Social Science Framework, and I want to let you know that the members on that framework also struggled with this idea about this conventional historiography, to try to change the framework so that we were not telling the story from a single narrow frame. And you all will remember during the development of the History Social Science Framework, there were a lot of comments about a lack of perspective or understanding about the relative representation of history, particularly in the conversation about South Asia and in conversations about African American roles in American history. So it was very difficult to develop the themes about that without looking at or falling back to those traditional historical comments. So in doing the work now to write this this particular subject matter document, the struggle, I'm hearing very clearly your struggle with how to reference or use the correct terms of art. I think you made the best decision is to wait for public comment, but I suspect in the same way that you all were struggling and offered differing or even opposite recommendations for how to address the edits, I suspect you are going to get the same spread of comments or continuum of comments in the public comment. So I would advise you, while we can pun and wait for the public comment to come back on this document, I would advise you to think about what it is you're trying to accomplish with the selection of the terms of art that you use. If the purpose of, and I do want to remind you of what Commissioner Diaz was trying to explain, the word history is not etymologically connected to the English possessive pronoun his. And while we are choosing to use words with the X in it to make a point about the content, I think some of the edits that you're trying to address or figure out are about the context of the subject matter you're writing about. So my advice to you is, while you are waiting for the public comment to come back on the document draft you're about to recommend, I recommend you also continue to go back and review the content as written and take a look at where each of those terms of art are being used. What is the difference between the content in that section and the context where the words are being used? Because as Dr. McDonald pointed out, there's a purpose and a context to the use of Chicano studies, which is appropriate, and it's different from the choice to use the X at the end of that word in place of the O in another section of the document. So it's not about consistency, it's about purpose and context. So I don't believe we're going to be done with this particular discussion, but I'm glad to see you all were willing to live with that question and see what the public also thinks about it. So I really applaud you for that concern and that hesitation.
Thank you, Board Member Rucker. Okay. Is there any public comment on the motion? Hearing none, I believe we are ready to vote by roll call. Remember, only members of the History Social Science Subject Matter Committee can vote. Tracy Yee will conduct the roll call vote.
IQC Chair Chow.
Yes.
SMC Chair Diaz.
Yes.
SMC Vice Chair Munoz.
Yes.
Commissioner Lara.
Yes.
Commissioner Pontai.
Yes.
Commissioner Renteria.
Yes.
Commissioner Rustin.
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, wonderful. I would also like to make a motion to ask for the full Instructional Quality Commission to delegate to the IQC Chair and the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee Chair the review and approval of the agreed upon changes to draft the model curriculum as well as any other edits identified by CFERD staff or the writers, grammar, punctuation, word order, citations before the draft is posted for public review and comment.
This is Commissioner Munoz, so moved.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Pontai. I second.
Is there any discussion of the motion? Are there any commissioners not on the committee that would like to comment? Are there any comments from State Board Member Rucker?
No, thank you.
Are there any public comment on the motion? Hearing none, I believe we are ready to vote by roll call. Remember, only members of the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee can vote. Tracy Yee will conduct the roll call vote.
IQC Chair Chow.
Yes.
SMC Chair Diaz.
Yes.
SMC Vice Chair Munoz.
Yes.
Commissioner Lara.
Yes.
Commissioner Pontai.
Yes.
Commissioner Renteria.
Yes.
Commissioner Rustin.
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you to the committee and the staff. The History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee has taken a very important action today, and I want to thank all the committee members for their contributions to the discussions and the decision-making process. I also want to thank the other commissioners and State Board liaison and members of the public who provided comments and suggestions today. And finally, I really wish to express my appreciation to our team of writers and to the CFERD staff for guiding us through our actions today. We couldn't do it without you. I look forward to seeing the public comment on the draft of the 2020 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum. At this time, any other public comment on other matters at this time? Hearing none, we're going to convene the full commission. As chair of the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee, I move that the full commission approve that the draft ethnic study model curriculum be posted for its public review and comment period, with the changes recommended by the committee.
Is there a second to the motion?
I so move. This is Commissioner Murphy-Corwin.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Diaz has moved and Commissioner Murphy-Corwin has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, is there any comment from our State Board liaison?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comment from members of the public at any of the teleconference sites? Okay, hearing none, I believe that we are ready to vote by roll call. Tracy Yee will conduct the roll call vote for us.
IQC Chair Chow.
Yes?
IQC Vice Chair Wu.
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman.
Yes.
Commissioner Costa Hernandez.
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Fairchild's absent. Commissioner Iniguez.
Yes.
Commissioner Lara.
Yes.
Commissioner Munoz.
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy-Corwin.
Yes.
Commissioner Naditz.
Yes.
Commissioner Pontai.
Yes.
Commissioner Renteria.
Yes.
Commissioner Rustin.
Yes.
Commissioner Tonkovich.
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Weber's absent. The motion passes.
Hey, as chair of the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee, I move that the full commission delegate the IQC chair and myself, the History, Social Science Subject Matter Committee chair, to review and the agreed upon changes to the draft model curriculum, as well as any minor edits identified by the curriculum frameworks and instructional resource division staff or the writers. Examples, grammar, punctuation, word order, and citation, before the draft is posted for public review and comment.
Is there a second to the motion?
Commissioner Murphy Corwin so moves.
Thank you. Commissioner Diaz has moved and Commissioner Murphy Corwin has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, is there any comment from our State Board Liaison?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comment from members of the public at any of the teleconference sites? Hearing none, I believe that we're ready to vote by roll call, and Tracy Yee will conduct the vote for us.
IQC Chair Chow,
Yes.
IQC Vice Chair Wu,
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Costa Hernandez,
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Fairchild's absent, Commissioner Iniguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Lara,
Yes.
Commissioner Munoz,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy Corwin,
Yes.
Commissioner Naditz,
Yes.
Commissioner Pontai,
Yes.
Commissioner Renteria,
Yes.
Commissioner Rustin,
Yes.
Commissioner Tonkovich,
Yes.
Commissioner Williamson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Weber's absent. The motion passes.
Thank you so much for everyone's hard work today, and for the participation of all of our commissioners, the public, the Seaford staff, and at this time, I'd like to ask commissioners if they have anything to report on. Okay. And then I'd like to invite public comment from individuals at any of the teleconference locations. Okay. So if there is no other public comment, at this time I'd like to adjourn our meeting. Thank you so much, everybody.